In this video, we're focusing on how to interpret schematic diagrams. So a schematic diagram is basically a diagram that shows you flows or processes. So a schematic diagram typically has arrows, and wherever the arrows point towards, it shows you a relationship between two different things. So for example, if the arrow points down here, it tells you that it is from one place, the sun, to the earth. If the arrow points back, that means that from the earth to the sun, something is happening as well. So you have to look at the direction of the arrows, and sometimes you have to look at the magnitude of the arrows too. So how big or how small the arrows are. In this case, the diagram shows you processes that contribute to the enhanced greenhouse effect. And in fact, the diagram shows you two different parts. The first part tells you what is the greenhouse effect, and eventually it tells you what is the enhanced greenhouse effect. So if you look at the progression here, number one, sunlight passes through the atmosphere and warms the earth. This part here, step one, is shown or represented using the orange arrows that come down from the sun. So typically a schematic diagram with a bit more information would actually label the stages for you, plus show you the arrows. So step number two, infrared radiation is given off by the earth. And how is this represented? It's represented using the arrows, the red arrows that go upwards. So the reason why they use the orange versus the red is to signal to you where that arrow is coming from. So the orange represents it's coming from the sun, the red represents it's coming from the earth. So typically a schematic diagram, they use different colors, different types of arrows to tell you that there are different things happening. Step number three, most escapes to outer space, allowing the earth to cool. So it's a continuation of step two here. Infrared radiation, most of it escapes to outer space, and that is represented by the arrow that goes all the way out to outer space. But some infrared radiation is trapped by gases in the air, including carbon dioxide, keeping the earth warm enough to sustain life. So that is represented by the arrows you see here. You see some escapes, tries to escape at least, but it gets reflected back down. So up to this point here, this is all about the greenhouse effect. And as we've learned, the greenhouse effect is actually a natural way to keep the earth warm to sustain life. So carbon dioxide on its own is actually not a bad thing. It helps to keep life, maintain life going on around Earth, helping us thrive. The issue is increasing levels of carbon dioxide. So that is what we call the enhanced greenhouse effect. When there is too much carbon dioxide on Earth, that is the problem. Because at this part here, step number four, instead of trapping heat, an optimum amount of heat on Earth, you end up trapping much more heat than necessary. And that is why the Earth continues to heat up, because the amount of heat has increased over time. So you can tell here, one schematic diagram actually gives you a lot of information. And that also means that there are many types of questions that can be asked about this diagram. The most simplistic way of asking a question is, describe the processes that contribute to the enhanced greenhouse effect. Just describe it. Another question that can be asked is, compare the greenhouse effect and the enhanced greenhouse effect. And that is where you have to point out that the enhanced greenhouse effect is actually a modification of step number four here. Because there is too much carbon dioxide concentration in the air that changes step number four. So let's move on to look at the next schematic diagram. So in this case, it's talking about the positive and negative impacts of unregulated bat watching tourism in caves. So unregulated means that it is not managed well by anyone, not managed by the government, not managed by businesses, not managed by the community in the area. So people just go in freely, or tour guides, they can just bring whatever tour groups they want to these caves to observe bats. So in this case, you notice that the schematic diagram again doesn't really show you a legend. But by right, even without showing you a legend, you should be able to interpret what it means. The legend is somewhat hidden here. So you see here there are red arrows and there are also blue arrows. So red arrows here is tagged to negative impacts, which then means that your blue arrows should be the positive impacts. So link it back to the title of the figure here. So let's start with the central idea, bat watching tourism. You notice that this is the center, this is the focus. This focus leads on to other effects. And you notice that the effects, sometimes it is one way, sometimes it is two way. So let's start with the blue ones first, the positive impacts. You see that the benefits of bat watching tourism is that you get recreational and aesthetic experience, wellness and mental health, cognitive development, profit for the community. So essentially it's telling you that bat watching tourism contributes to a recreational experience. Whoever's visiting these caves probably can benefit in terms of being more relaxed, experiencing something new. Cognitive development. By going to the caves to watch these bats, maybe tour guides bringing you along with the tour actually give you more information about why bats behave in this way. So that is intellectual or cognitive development. Profit for the community. As people pay to go for these types of tourism, the profits can actually be generated for the community that runs this. A portion of the profits could be for the community. So these are potential benefits. What is another benefit here? Bat conservation and management. Improved awareness about bats, the biodiversity in caves. Change community practices. So for example, if people in the past didn't really care about bats, didn't control the population, or wanted to cull bats, wanted to kill the bat population, maybe that community practice will change. Enactment of policies. So if bat watching tourism is a source of income for the country, it is possible that the country tries to regulate it a bit more in future. That's where policies would come in. Finally here, finance, conservation and protection. So because bat watching tourism is a source of income, people are more inclined to conserve this kind of tourism and protect it. So that's what we mean by bat watching tourism leads to benefits here on top, leads to benefits below as well. Now you notice that bat watching tourism also has a benefit here. Key benefits leads to bat conservation and management. True, because of all these benefits that it brings to people, bats might be conserved, bats might be managed. But you also see the red color here. Why is it that key benefits lead to negative impacts on bat conservation and management? That is because if you have too much of a good thing, so all these benefits are there, what happens is that too many people are visiting the bat caves. And in terms of conservation and management, as much as you try to regulate this industry, you might find that it is difficult to manage, or it might go beyond control. So that is why benefits leading to bat conservation and management, it can be a good thing, but if things get out of hand, too many people want this kind of tourism, it could also be a bad thing. Looking at the right hand side now, where you see a lot of negative impacts, bat watching tourism leads to physical destruction. When people go into the caves, they might leave litter around, they might trample on certain things. Change in ambient temperature. So as humans go in, you're introducing heat into the area, which could change the conditions, could change the environment that is best suited for bats to live in. Waste and pollution, like I mentioned, disturbances. So as people take photographs or try to take photographs, as they enter the cave, they talk to each other, the tour guides are actually giving you information. All these contribute to disturbances to the bats. Another one, bat population and diversity. So if the bats are affected, their population might decline, they might move out of this area. Disease might spread because as humans go in or you leave litter around, that could introduce bacteria, new types of diseases that bats may not have encountered. Behavior anomalies. So If bats don't really know how to react to all these disturbances, they might behave differently. Local extinction is an extension of population decline. And you look up and down here, so these relate to each other. The cave environment that's not suitable for bat populations, or is less than suitable, would affect the bat population. And in turn, the disease, all these bacteria, also affects the environment, so it goes both ways. Let's look at the right hand side here, other bat ecosystem services. So if your bat population is affected, that also affects other biodiversity in the area, other organisms that depend on the bat to live. So for example here, reduction of yield for bat-dependent plant species. So if plant species actually depend on the bats, then you might see that if the bat population declines, the plant population will also decline. The other one is this, increase in insect pests in agro-ecosystems. So if bats are around to control the pests, if their population declines, the pest population will grow. And all in all, that will lead to altered biodiversity of cave species. So all these will lead to negative impacts on the benefits in ecosystems that would affect your benefits here. So everything is related to each other depending on which part of the diagram you're trying to regulate. It always has an impact on the next part of it.